Hello，大家好。今天呢，我们来到了 Auroville 的一所高中。这所高中呢是 Auroville 最开始的几所高中之一啊。然后也培养了很多很多的孩子们，有这个当地村民的孩子，然后也有后来加入到这个黎明之城在这里长大的孩子们。然后这所高中的毕业生们呢，有的选择在社区继续留下来，然后有的呢去到了印度很多其他的地方，然后还有呢去到了世界其他的国家学习工作，也有一些呢在游历世界之后又回到了黎明之城那很多伙伴其实对黎明之城的教育都非常感兴趣。其实我自己作为一个10几年的教育人，也对这儿的教育非常的感兴趣。黎明之城的教育是如何去践行黎明之城的精神，又去传承黎明之城的这样的哲学和精神呢？那今天我也请到了2位在这个学校的创校期特别重要的2个人一位呢就是坐在我右边的对这个Bounty， 然后 Bounty 呢，他是在创校之初就参与创校的这样的一位先驱者，然后呢，另一位呢就是坐在我左边的Srimai，他呢是在这个学校最创始届的学生他已经毕业也已经很早就毕业了，然后去到美国的这个伯克利大学上学，然后最近呢刚刚也完成了自己的博士论文，是在这个人类学和社会学方向，现在也回到了 Auroville 继续生活和工作。所以今天我会邀请他们2个来聊一聊在这里的教育的感受，作为亲历者。好，那接下来我可能会用一些英文去做提问，然后中间我也会用中文跟大家做一些解释。好的，那我先来问一下这个先请2位介绍一下他们自己哈。那我们就先从 Bounty 开始。So on this part, I will ask both of you to have a little introduction about yourself. Okay, so we will start from Bounty. Okay, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, ni hao. This is Bunty. I came here about 25 years back and I started my Auroville career teaching in high school. Surimai was one of my first students. And also, I'm also happy to say that she was one of the first batches to pass out from high school in Auroville, the actual high school which we have here. Before coming to Auroville, I worked as an engineer and I had a master's in business administration. So I was working in the corporate world. But I think when I started teaching out here, I just felt that happiness, the satisfaction of imparting education and sharing my experiences more than just a regular teacher, and we go by first name out here, so it was that much more informal and that much more a family way of teaching and learning from each other. So that's how it was. And so now I'm a full-time Auroville resident, and I think it doesn't need any further introduction.
Okay, thank you. And yes, Srimai, you can introduce a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Suryamai. I was born and raised here in Auroville. That's why I have this Indian name, unique Indian name. And as Bunty said, I attended school here. At the time, it was still quite experimental. Kind of an experimental approach to education is quite a central ideal in Auroville. And actually education as a whole, kind of lifelong education, is really central to life in Auroville. So I feel really lucky to have been able to grow up and learn in this environment, in which it was not only in school but in the whole actual community life that we interacted and engaged with so many different aspects of life here. It's a small community but very vibrant with lots of different things happening, and we were able to learn from that by participating in that and being a part of it. And actually setting up this school in its early years kind of felt like that. It felt like we were doing it together, and that was a really special time. And then I left because I was really interested in pursuing higher education. So I wanted to go to university, I wanted to continue my studies. And so I left Auroville for a number of years. I went to university in the UK and in the US. And actually at first, my first, let's say, engagement with university and with life outside of Auroville was not very satisfactory, actually. Because growing up here and the education we had here, we were very independent and we were very self-directed. So there's an ideal of sort of free progress education where the individual is really involved and, let's say, empowered to shape their education. And I went to university and it kind of felt like I was being spoon-fed, although we were already supposedly at a higher level of education. So I actually dropped out of university the first time. But then I was able to pick it up at UC Berkeley in California, which was a really progressive school in a program that also allowed you to kind of build your own study, actually. And this program was also special in that you had to have a research topic and kind of create your whole program around supporting that research, even at an undergraduate level. And I remember the first appointment that I had with my advisor, and one of the first things he asked me, obviously, was, "Where are you from?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, how do I answer this question? You know, do I give the short answer, the long answer? These are questions you ask yourself."
Yeah.
And I still remember all the other people waiting for the appointments after me, because in a big university like that, you have 10-minute slots because so many students.
Yeah.
But the whole office hours he spent with me and with all the other people waiting, because he was so fascinated by Auroville, and he started asking me, "But how's the politics work and how's the economics work?" And by the end of the interview, it was our first session together. He said, "Okay, you'll do your research on Auroville." And I said, "Really? But how can I do research on my home, you know, on the place that I grew up in, and it's such a small place, you know, what's the interest?" He said, no, trust me, this is a PhD. Already back then he said this is a PhD.
Wow. When you were in undergrad?
Yeah, first year or second year of undergrad. So then I thought, okay, let me do this, let me jump into it. And it turns out I did do a PhD on Auroville, which allowed me to spend quite a few years here, also looking at Auroville through a different lens than just the lens or just the kind of experiences that I grew up with, because it made me engage with people that I didn't engage with growing up. Even though we're a small community, there's so many different things going on. So there's such diversity of people here, of perspectives, of experiences. So it was really a way for me to explore my own community in a fuller way. And that exploration is still ongoing, for sure.
Yeah.
And since moving back here, other than continuing my research, I also have been involved in the governance of Auroville, which is also has an experimental aspect to it, and is very much, again, has this participatory aspect that I also highlighted in the education. So basically, how can we figure out how to do things better together, essentially, to put it really simply. So those have been my main areas of focus here. I've also taught embodied practices like awareness through the body, which is a unique educational program that was developed in this community, all around essentially how to inspire individuals to live really from the center of their being and to get to really know themselves in all their aspects. So often education might focus on the intellectual part, and if you're lucky, maybe some physical education, but this was really about exploring very different parts of the being, and trying to kind of put all those pieces together to become more wholesome individuals. So I did that growing up here, and I facilitate that today because I think it's very valuable.
Yeah, totally. Actually, I also participated awareness through body workshop. I participated the first one, and then the second one, the third one. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that. It showed me a lot of aspects of life experience that I've never experienced before. Yeah, like using your face, touch the water, but in a very subtle way, and put your hands like hovering over the water, and you really feel that energy from the water that you never felt before. You feel like the water is giving you a massage. It's like you are opened up to this new experience of life. Yeah, which is really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's really maybe special about it also is that Auroville is a spiritual community, but it's a spiritual community that really has a focus on action and experience. So it's not about spiritual ideals or concepts so much, or the study of spirituality, or even recitations or scriptures or any of those kinds of practices that are traditionally associated with spirituality. But it's very much about actually living your everyday life in a conscious way, and ideally with some kind of spiritual consciousness infused in that. And I think the awareness through the body practice is really valuable, because it's a way to basically awaken that awareness in a really young age without being prescriptive in any way, without telling people this is, the word spiritual is never used in a session like that. It's really about awakening, in this case children, it's now taught to adults also, but to many different aspects of their being, and how that kind of inner center is actually there in all of us.
Yeah.
And how to access it.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you. So,
in fact, just to add to what Surimai has been saying, you see, now I grew up in the outside society where it was formal education. Like she said, it was complete spoon feeding. This is where you go, this is how you do. And you end up being cynical. So when all these workshops that she's talking about, be it on yoga or physical development, or even the ATB or the events of the body, people like me at that time would see it through a very cynical eye, and that has obviously changed. And coming to the spiritual aspect of it, obviously people have different definitions of spirituality, but here it's more of an inner journey, and it's pursuing our own internal research and searching of ourselves, but living in a collective. Okay, and the experience she's gained by working in public services or other aspects of Auroville, it's not about not looked at as like a job or something that way. It's more about seeing what you can contribute and what you can learn from the same thing. So individual aspirations in a collective, and that actually sums up what we call integral education, where all the 5 aspects of the human psyche is developing at the same time, being the emotional side, the physical side, the mental side, the psychic side, and the spiritual side. And spirituality, as defined, is purely individualistic out here. There's nothing like, it's not a group in spirituality where everyone's uniformly and homogeneously pursuing one thing.
yeah.
And that's a very good part of. That's why we hesitate to call ourselves a spiritual community, because of the understanding of that word outside. But we show it through our experiences and through our practice. We don't isolate ourselves from the regular way of living. We don't. Like you said, it's not a retreat. It's in the real world, and finding your core, living in a collective in the real world. I think that is the biggest challenge almost every human on earth faces. It's very easy to lock yourself in a room and say, now it's silent. Put earmuffs and say, okay, now there's silence. Can you hear the noise with your ears open? And how much can you focus on your core?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember in my ATB workshop, there were some people, I think they were like talking loudly outside, and one of the participants said, ask the instructor, the facilitator, can you go out and tell them to shush, or to go away, because we're having workshop here? And his immediate response is that noticing what you're thinking of, noticing how your mind changing, your emotion changing as you are hearing that. Can you still be able to come back to your own center and remain centered and neutral and peaceful when there are these noises outside? Because this is how the world is. There could be so many different kind of noises, but the point is always about bring your awareness back to your center and find your centerpiece. So that leads to my next question is, because Auroville is such a unique existence, I would say, in the world, So what is when it comes to education, what is the most unique thing, or what is like the most valuable thing that you have gained from your education experience here? And for you, of course, it's the involvement of this educational movement here. Yeah.
Let her go first.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I would have to say that the main kind of the most valuable aspect was this autonomy, in a way that was cultivated from a young age. In the sense that autonomy, in the sense of a certain kind of empowerment to really participate in shaping actually one's education and one's journey, but in a very nurturing and supportive environment. Bunty mentioned earlier about it kind of feeling like a family style, and I really agree with that. I think it felt like there were relationships of care that are unique because we are a community. So it's not like going to, a public high school somewhere else where you might have not much in common with the teacher, or no values in common even. I mean, who knows? So to be inscribed in a community setting, I think was really supportive, but a community setting that really valued the individual and the individuality.
Can you give
really
a couple
special.
of maybe like one or two examples to
Yeah,
demonstrate how that individuality and sense of community is manifested in day-to-day life?
Sure. So, for example, I mean, in the schooling, I think we were encouraged to reach out to projects, to people, within the community if we wanted to learn something more about any kind of particular aspect. And so to actually go out there, and of course it was safe to do that because we're in a community setting. So you can't necessarily really do that if you're in a city. So it allowed you a certain freedom to find your own autonomy and kind of empower yourself really, and maybe there's something about self-confidence there too, but in a safe setting. So I think that was it sounds maybe quite conceptual when I say it, but it's a really powerful kind of formula when you actually are experiencing it in those very formative years. Yeah, and the feeling that education wasn't just confined to the classroom. That there was so much going on in the community and so many things in which we could participate in, whether it was like community plays or performances or all kinds of things where there was also a really multi-age kind of aspect to the society, which I personally found really enriching. So it wasn't kind of like sectioned off where, this is kind of your section and you're in school now and this is what you're,
You don't need our school.
Yeah, it's so that kind of... just that richness from a lot of interconnectivity that was really valuable.
Yeah. So as the old saying goes, it takes a village to raise a kid.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is literally.
Orville does that very
yeah,
well.
literally.
Absolutely. In fact, the difference I could say it, of course, from my schooling days to what I was when I was teaching these children at that time. It's such a stark difference. You can just see I wore a school uniform, went to school 9 to 5, back home 8 to 3 or whatever it was. The teacher-student relationship was maintained as a teacher and student. And that is one part. Here, of course, it's like, going from one room to the other room. That's what it was. From where we were staying to school. We see each other on the roads, we eat together, we, doing sports together, everything was there. There really was, it's like you said, a village to raise a child. And for the children to raise the village also. It works both ways out here. And one more stark difference is success was not measured by the amount of knowledge they gained through subjective ways, or subjective knowledge that they had. It was more about the holistic way how they progressed, how they evolved. And the other aspect was at that time we were 33 children, if I remember correctly. Some other number stuck in my head. When we first started taking these students in to give them some kind of training to be able to pursue higher studies. It was good. The ratio was good. We knew most of the students individually, or we got to know them over a couple of months or years or whatever it was. We knew the families. So there was already a certain amount of information, and without judging, that would inculcate in raising the child. and to see how best we could nourish that person. Okay, so it's not like, okay, now she's learning mathematics, so that's all we teach. I don't care what happened to her at home or to her, to anything else, whether she's traumatized this morning or there was something else that has happened. It wasn't subjective. It was taking an aspect of reaching out to the heart and heart to heart. And one thing I can tell you is the students were not fearful.
The students
Were not fearful. We, irrespective of what the issues were, they never felt judged. Yeah, there were some sensitive children, all right, but ultimately everyone overcame that because we grew up as a family.
Yeah.
And I was not just a teacher, I was a student myself. I learned so much from them. What not to do, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's such a stark difference between outside and here.
Yeah, so you were actually speaking of a very major point about adolescents' life, which is their mental health. Because as we all know, kids live outside of Auroville in like India or in the US or in China, where I'm coming from. High school kids is always the most stressed out, and the family is also most stressed out, especially when it comes to college preparation and their exams and all that. So I think my next question is really about how do you I mean, from your own experience, of course, what was the pressure level that you felt when you were here? Do you feel like stressed out by exams? You know, how was your anxiety level back then as a high school student?
I don't remember feeling anxious at all, to be
Such
perfectly
a blessing.
honest.
Such a blessing. Yeah.
But one thing that I do remember is one kind of system that we had in place here in Auroville, in the school, and I think across Auroville, is really kind of a mentorship sort of system. And there was a sort of a formal mentorship system and an informal one. So I feel like I grew up with a lot of mentors. So for example, in school, I had a mentor that was one of the teachers, and you chose your mentor. So there was someone that you could check in with about anything, and it wasn't a mentor for your intellect, you know, for your whatever, how you're progressing in school. I mean, you could obviously talk about that, but it was really, as I remember understanding it, it was really someone who you could go and talk to about whatever might be going on, whatever challenges might be happening, whatever questionings might be happening. So that was there. But also, you know, I mentioned earlier this kind of multi-age aspect of the Auroville community, and I would say that I had other mentors also who were older, you know, kind of the age of my teachers or whatever, who were also really available to me, and checking in. And it's true that a lot of them were teachers initially. When you mentioned about the stress, the exams, one thing is the awareness through the body teacher at the time, for example, used to offer us like special sessions for like how to decompress and de-stress before exams, you know. So we had like these incredible tools and support systems that were in place. And actually, when I myself started facilitating awareness through the body for teenagers, I remember this kind of first handover with one of the teachers where, you know, pointing to what Bunty was saying earlier, where the teacher sat with me and talked to me about all the students that were going to be in my class and shared with me some of the challenges that some of them might have. This person has this issue at home, this person has this health issue, this person is having confidence issues. So there was really... I can see that there was then and there is now a real sense of kind of holistic care of the students. Yeah,
That's so important. Yeah.
And even, you know, from a younger age, remembering this feeling of safety in the community, which might have changed now. It's bigger, it's more open than when I was growing up. But just the fact of something as simple as being able to cycle to school, you know, really early on. I'm not saying, of course, there are places in the world where people can do that, but in a lot of urban settings, you know, just basic safety is an issue. And to have a safe context in which you can, again, do that makes you gain a certain autonomy, confidence, mentioned fearlessness quite early on, which I think was very formative.
Yeah. So can I also say this is something that really the education in Auroville helps you help to prepare you for living anywhere in the world, because you have this sense of security, sense of safety. So no matter where you go, your heart always feels settled. You don't feel like scarce or insufficient or I'm not enough. Yeah.
just to add to that, in fact, see, about 20, 25 years back, there were not so many opportunities out here within Auroville itself, or facilities, or things available for us, even in the form of recreation. Now, the confidence which they developed was more internal. It was not about the sense of, it was an internal security. And with the limited availability out here, they could make it out. They could make it anywhere. That was the confidence they had. They didn't need much. They learned, I wouldn't say survival techniques. It's not about survival, but they learn how to adjust to where less is more. You don't need too much. So, I mean, Auroville has always, even in the schooling part of it, or in general way, the community itself has always focused on a need-based living, not a want-based living. Okay, and that need-based living is, you evolve from the needs, or a collective need on a larger platform of the society. But in school, of course, it was the children, what their needs were, and we always focused on that. We didn't want them to say, okay, you have to be an achiever. You have to, even if she didn't want it. She's a brilliant student. She had brains to do everything she could, but that's how we see it. But what she wants mattered more to it. She probably wanted to just cut grass. That's okay. There are so many other students, like one was repairing cycles, the other was doing carpentry, the others did construction. Though they had brilliant minds, and there were some who couldn't really do well subjectively in school, but they went on to do something much better and settle down in life. So it's more about a personality development and the confidence which you can give to the core, and not for people to, not on a reactionary way. You're not answerable to society. You're answerable to yourself. And that's the confidence you need.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. I remember when I was looking at Mother's book there's a book called On Education. That one, it talks about the teacher's role is not to teach, it's to guide. Yeah, and to facilitate, to bring up the uniqueness and the wholeness of each and every child, because they have everything within themselves already. But it's just how we can facilitate that and how we can help them to bring out the best of themselves. So that's really what the teacher's role is. So this next question is for you specifically. So after, seeing the world and, going out in the US or in the UK, I'm sure you have so many opportunities available to you. So what made you come back to Auroville?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember some of my friends at the time, after I graduated from Berkeley, were just like, why are you going back now? Now's the perfect time to start a career and everything. Totally. You could go back later, Yeah. It was definitely a good experience, a very formative experience for me to be outside of Auroville. I'm super grateful to have done that and pursued the studies that I did and everything. But I do remember, I would come back and visit once in a while. And usually I could only visit, 2-3 weeks like that. And then this one time I came back, I think it was for 6 weeks or maybe even longer. Maybe it was after my undergrad. I don't remember exactly. And so it was the first time that I'd been back in Auroville as an adult for a longer period of time than just visiting. So you do more than just, seeing your friends and family and everything. You kind of, get engaged and get a taste of what life is like here. And it was just a feeling. I just remember this feeling of wholesomeness that was very, very palpable, very powerful. And I remember feeling like, yeah, this is what I want to feel like. This is what I want my life to feel like. It was that feeling that was fostered here in this context. So that was the first thing that really pulled me back. And then I came back, and Auroville definitely has its challenges, and I think that you can definitely be aware of some of these growing up, but personally I feel like I was quite oblivious to them when I moved as an adult and started getting engaged and realized wow, it's this hard to make things happen.
So it was easier for a kid
growing up
to be here. Growing up, it's all bliss and joy and all that sense of community. But when you come back, sitting from more maybe like even an outsider perspective, or even a more like overarching perspective, you started to see the challenges.
I think, in the sense of getting engaged in actually, shaping things in the community, making things happen, and actually gained a lot of respect for people like Bunty and Charlie and other people in the school at the time who, I guess must have been facing a lot of these challenges and dealing with them, so that we could be having the experience that we were having. And so to actually really see what that takes. But I also felt, I think, really emboldened by knowing that they had faced these challenges, but they had been successful, clearly, because I had this really great experience. So there was that thing of noting the challenge and noting also how possible it was to actually fully live with that challenge. And I think that that's also a really important aspect of understanding kind of Auroville as a so-called spiritual community, as Bunty was saying. We don't like to use that term because it gives connotations of, you're retreated from everyday life and you're not kind of dealing with the challenges of life. And I think what's interesting is to actually have these high ideals, but still be facing the challenges that life brings at a lot of levels. And Auroville is, also in a very complex context, economically, politically, geographically, environmentally. I mean, there are so many challenges in this context, just like there are challenges all over the world. But what's interesting is to not actually shy away from those challenges and to actually have to deal with those challenges and remain, like Bunty was saying, remain actually centered on that kind of core aspiration, regardless of what's happening around and regardless of what life, might be throwing at you or might be challenging you with. So I find that very meaningful, very meaningful. And I think that I could live a much easier life if I'm honest. I might have to, work more frenzied hours, who knows, because the capitalist world is quite crazy sometimes in that way. But I think that this level of actually engaging, really engaging in trying to do something different in the midst of those challenges, not kind of just like, gliding past them or kind of ignoring them somewhere else, where you can make good money and whatever, do things that are socially well seen and well compensated and all of that. I think, doing this is a lot more interesting for me and a lot more meaningful and a lot more rewarding. And to do it in a collective with other people who are also engaged in doing that is something very rewarding and very powerful. Because I think I would find it very difficult to try and have that approach if I was isolated, somewhere in California without a community of practice that I was a part of. So, that's really special. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, really touched by all this. So can I say like the biggest difference is for here you find a lot of like-minded people who are practicing, who are practitioners, they're doing things in a collective way and can be honest with challenges, but without losing hope. And this is what is hard to find in outside world, or especially in a capitalized and money-driven world. Yeah.
I mean, just to add a little more to what she said, one thing about Auroville is material aspirations are so redundant out here. In the sense, it really does not matter what you own or what you don't or something, because there is the competitiveness or the comparativeness that's so much reduced, and it's more about cooperation. And like she said, when she comes back and how she felt in comparison to either UK or the US. Now, I've traveled, of course, in the last 20 years and 25 years here and there. But, I take the taxi back from the airport and just turn into Auroville. The switch just says, I'm home. I never got that feeling anywhere, even when when I was going back to my parents' place or to wherever I was before. That feeling of home is something which still gives me goosebumps when I say home and then I think of Auroville. It's not a feeling that you can really explain to anyone. And obviously, in fact, that was one of the biggest challenges we had when we were, giving them subjective knowledge just to see they go for higher education. A lot of parents and a lot of people from education background were asking us, but then they won't come back. What happens to Auroville? It dies down. The next generation is gone. There's brain drain. All these kind of words were being used. 95% of them came back to settle here. 95% of those 33. And they have families out here, they have children out here, they have the fourth generation of children from the same students whom we were teaching are here. So I think that sums up the success of Auroville, and not about education in the way people understand, in the conventional sense. This integral, holistic education is something which school is a building, but education is, I think,
It's borderless.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, it's really, and the residents here are literally from many countries in the world,
Yes,
about
that's one thing I
60,
really want to
right?
add,
So it's not like specific to like Europeans or Indians or Chinese, but it's universal.
To give a small example, when I first started teaching, she will remember I had this little things jutting out of my arms because I broke my collarbone and I had all these metal things jutting out of so everyone was a little wondering who the hell is this guy.
Robot.
And yeah, there were little kids out there, and I think she saw a couple of photos also of you, which I was teaching you something. I entered the classroom, of course. First I had just a couple of students and both were Indians. And then slowly, as the year progressed, I had 15-20 students out there representing almost 12 to 13 countries. It was amazing because everyone were in their own stages of evolution, so as to speak. And together, knowing that they grew up from the school on the other side, from primary school to coming to the high school, it's amazing how to cater to each and every person and see where they stand. Language was a challenge, finances was a challenge, family backgrounds were a challenge, and their lifestyles, from where they came. Some were born here, some had come at a very young age. It was an amazing journey. I mean and it just continues. That time we were 30 countries, today we are 60 countries. We were 1,400 people at that time, and now we're 3,200. So it is, and I've always maintained one thing, that the success of an experiment, which we know Auroville is not what it's achieved or what it's not. It's in its continuity. And 55 years down, and we're still continuing.
Yeah.
It's the biggest experiment in human unity, or humanity as such.
Yeah, so you wonderfully sort of wrapped up our interview. So before we end this, I have this one last question. We talk a lot about the great aspects of the schools here. And I think for people who are watching this, they would maybe also thinking about, come here and to have this kind of schooling or this living in Auroville. So what kind of people that, in your own opinion, that you wouldn't suggest them coming here to study, that may not be a good fit, for Auroville or for the schooling here? Yeah.
I think that one has to always remain open to surprises, because you never know what's going to happen to that student or for that student, or what transformation is going to take place. So I would say that, if someone really feels called to be here, then I think they should follow that call. And if it's not for them, or if that call is coming from a kind of misunderstanding or something, that'll become clear for them pretty soon. But if there's some deeper meaning to them having this experience, then I think I think Auroville is full of surprises in that way, and I think that's one of the really interesting aspects of its diversity, is how these very different profiles of people, what happens to them in this environment, in this context. Yeah. So yeah, I would say stay open.
Open mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, in fact, exactly same thing. Those with an open mind everyone's welcome. We are not going to stop anyone, and people can change their opinions once they come here. But to be rigid and to have predetermined ideas and expectations, that would take time for them to overcome, definitely. But if they're unwilling to overcome, it's not about Auroville, we can absorb that, but it would be for them to figure out, is it a suffering for them or is it a learning? And they shouldn't be pushed to it through their parents or relatives or anything. It should be the calling. It should be their own calling. And I mean, even as an adult, it was my calling. My friends, I mean, after passing out from business schools and having a good corporate job, my friends were thinking I lost it. They said, "What are you doing?" I mean, the first question they asked, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Auroville." "Oh, what's your salary? What's your position?" I said, "Nothing.
Yeah.
I earn 0." I didn't know there was a maintenance structure also. I said, "I don't earn anything. I'm just teaching and I'm having a lot of fun." There was no insecurity about not earning at that time. I need a roof. I had a roof. Okay, I had some savings, so I was a little entitled. You want to put it in those words. But I had food, I had friends, and I had something I could do the whole day by teaching. In fact, they even came home to study during their exams because we need a little extra coaching. So it was fun, and that's it. And that's something which we would like to break. If someone's going to be too rigid about it, then they should think twice before coming here. It's not about changing the world and changing everyone. See how you adapt to it, how you change yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's it. It's a personality development out here. And it comes from the core. It's not just superficial.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah. So, is there anything else that you would really like to say to the audience who are watching this? Many of them are Chinese, and since you've been to China, you also been to China, and seeing how it is there. Is there any particular message that you want to convey?
I'll just hold Suryamai's hand and say, "Guess who's the teacher, who's the student?"
You already spoiled it before. Yeah.
That's it. No, she's equally my teacher as much as I was hers. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, that's why it's all equal and it goes mutual way. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Yes, so beautifully. 所以刚刚呢，跟两位的这个采访特别的精彩哈，我自己也是特别的共鸣，然后也很受益匪浅。其实从他们的沟通当中特别从新的这个分享，我们能够感觉到黎明之城的教育它的有这样几个特别之处我觉得第一个呢，就是他们提到的是高度个性化的，就是每一个学生他的天资和禀赋。然后他最本真的样子能够在这里完完整整的，然后被呵护去呈现出来，而且呢，在这个社区当中会有很多的人一起去支持他们的成长，去看见他们的需求，去陪伴他们。所以真的像我们说的这个谚语所说举全村之力养育一个孩子，那在这真的是这样的。那这个孩子呢，不是要养育成我们社会既定的标准，比如说要进名牌大学呀，要找一份好的工作呀，它其实是在所有的这个所谓的名校然后工作收入这些束缚之外的一种成长的方式，而这种方式呢，是根据每个人他自己的天资禀赋，根据他想做的事情去决定的，没有任何预设好的标准和框架，没有对于所谓成功的定义。所以这一点呢，是我觉得在他们的沟通当中特别打动我的。我觉得也是在我们的社会当中所大家忽视的或者是说没有去考虑到的一个很重要的方面，就是摆脱社会的标准和习俗对我们的一些捆绑，或者是说一些期待。我们不是为了任何人的期待而活，我们是为了自己去活出全然的真我，去绽放自己而活。所以这一点我印象非常的深刻。那我们也看到，其实这个Suryamai他从小在这样一个环境下长大，包括在高中的时候， 他也没有任何的压力，没有人告诉他你一定要去什么学校，你的考试要多少分，没有人去给他这些条条框框和标准。但是呢，因为他完全的绽放了自己的天赋啊，然后他也是一个很喜欢学习，然后也很善于去沟通的人，所以呢，他后面到了伯克利大学去学社会学啊，现在又读了这个社会学的博士，然后回到黎明之城，再为这里的这个社区的成长和繁荣去做他自己的贡献。所以你看，这是一个非常好的生命的一个闭环，既是这个孩子本身在这里成长的这样一个成长，然后外出再回归，同时呢，也是整个社区的一个可持续发展很重要的一个前提，就是在这里长大的人，他们出去学习，然后又回来持续的贡献，这样呢，它是一个生生不息的过程。所以在Suryamayee的分享当中，我们能够看到这样的教育，其实它会让孩子能够很好的面对世界，面对各种各样的挑战然后呢，他可以去适应各种各样的环境。对，然后最终呢，他又跟自己的初心连接，回到一切开始的地方。对，这是多么完整的一个，多么丰盛的一个生命的体验那么还有一点呢，我在这里听到的呢，其实就是关于在最开始这个建校的时候就是刚刚 Bounty 有提到，就是在建校的时候这个学校并不是说只为某一群人而建因为当时来到黎明之城的很多都是一些欧洲人，并不是只为这些欧洲人的后代们去建，而是在最开始有很多印度的，就是当地村庄的这些孩子们来到这里上学，然后同时呢，也会有来自各国的这个黎明之城的初始建设者们，他们的孩子在这里上学，所以一开始这个环境就非常的多元，对吧？像刚刚邦蒂说的，一开始就是有几个国家的人，后面呢有10几个国家的人，到最后有30多个国家人在一个班上，哇，这就像一个小小的联合国一样。我们经常说国际化的教育，国际化的教育。那当你的同学有来自这么多不同的文化的时候，你们坐在一个教室里去学习，这就是最国际化的教育。而这个国际化呢，它又并不脱离于本土因为很多学生是来自于当地的而且这里的教育其实也是免费的，所以它并不是说只为了一些特权阶层或者中产阶级有钱人去设立的，它是面向所有人开放的。只要你赞同这样的教育理念和学习理念，你都可以来到这儿，只要在学校的承载范围内，对吧？你都是可以来到这里去学习的而且刚刚这个他们还提到了一点，就是混龄的学习，就是学生在这个学校里面，他不仅仅只跟他同龄人在一起，就也会有不同年级的人在一起学习，在一起交流。然后同时他们走向社区之后呢，这里有各种各样年纪的人，对吧？有很小的小朋友，然后也有几十岁的老人。那在学校里面会有很多的项目是在社区当中，因为你要参与到建设这个社区，所以你会自然而然接触到来自各种各样背景、各种各样年龄的人。那你的这个智慧的面向呢，也是接触的是非常的广泛的，有不同样的人带着不同的人生阅历、不同的智慧走到你的生命当中，然后你去形成你自己对于自我的理解，然后对于世界的理解所以其实世界不在远方其实就在脚下。对，他们就在社区里面，然后从社区里面感知世界，然后去理解自己，然后再走向世界，再回来我觉得是一件特别特别美好的事情。这个也是我们教育我们的教育希望达成的一个终极的目标，对吧？就是人回到他自己最原本的样子，然后去绽放自己的天性，而且呢，能够在他所生活的地方去很幸福、很开心的去做一件他喜欢的事情，而不把它当成是工作这个刚刚大家也听到了，在 Bounty 的分享当中在 Suryamayee 的分享当中，他们都是很享受在这里，哪怕这里的工资跟外面是不能比的，对吧？然后这里的生活条件、住宿也不会像一些很发达的城市那样，但是他们的精神是很富足的。但是在这里，基本的需求也会被满足，而不是沉浸在过多物质的或者资本化的这样的一些欲望当中，那就不是我们的需求了，那是我们的欲望。所以当你让自己对于物质的欲望，对于很多外求的欲望能够渐渐剥离他们的时候，能回到自己的本心，你会发现 less is more， 就是你需要的是很少的。而当物质上 越少的时候呢，你的精神上也就越富足啊。那我看到其实黎明之城很多人都是在这样的状态当中，那大家有机会呢，也可以来到黎明之城去体验这样的教育啊，去真正去感受，对，可以在这里也找到自己心灵回家的这样一条道路。在这个采访的最后呢，我们也看到Bounty 和他曾经的学生啊，他们两个人就是一起拉着手，然后两个人坐在我的左右边其实两个人讲到，在这个过程当中是相互学习，就是教学相长的一个过程，没有谁是老师，没有谁是学生彼此呢都从对方身上学到很多。我觉得这是一种特别真的是一种教育人的心态，然后也是在践行这样的一种教育。那在 Auroville 我们也随处可见这样的方式没有人是老师，没有人是学生，我们都是一起在这里实践成长，在每天的生活当中去修行。所以今天我们能看到，在黎明之城的教育其实是非常先锋的它真正实现了这个世界级学校，对吧？学校拆掉了围墙，包括我们思维上的围墙。然后呢，它的评价方式是很多元的，是非常个性化的不是这种考试标准的。对，然后老师的角色呢也是很多元的，他是引导者，然后他是心灵上的支持，然后也是放学之后一起打羽毛球，一起去吃饭的人，是一个同伴老师的角色非常的多元，而且呢，还有就是教育公平，对，在这里帮助很多当地印度农村的孩子接受到非常好的教育，然后到世界各国去上学。所以在我们经常讲的一些很美好的教育理想当中，其实黎明之城在20多年的教育实践都在一点一点的实现。我觉得这个就是这场实验很成功的一个证明。